have a very important announcement. I've finally done it. I watched Ethan Klein's content nuke, and I'm not going to call it context puke as I normally do, because the reality of the matter is it was brilliant. Nothing was out of context. Everything was correct. I am an Islamist, fundamentalist, radical terrorist. I am a vicious anti-Semite. It's true. Wake up, Ethan. Wake up, Ethan. Ethan, wake up.
Wakey, wakey, Ethan. Wake up, Ethan. Wake up. Time to be awake, Ethan.
Wake up, Ethan.
This is no longer a dream. This is a nightmare. Wake up.
Ethan, the dumb bitch is telling you to wake up.
Wake up.
Ethan, wake up.
Ethan, wake up. Wake up. Since anyone? Just wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up.
Wake up, Ethan.
I'm not going to do a react content yet, chat.
I'm the same joke.
You know, every time I do a video on Ethan Klein, aka H3H3 Productions of the H3 Podcast, without fail, I will get comments making the same point or the same 2 points repeatedly from multiple different users. The first among them are, here are some bad things that Ethan has said or done in the past, and I should acknowledge that for whatever reason, as if I don't already know that. But the thing is, those are reasons why you shouldn't be a fan of Ethan, why I'm not personally a fan of Ethan, but they do not rise to the level of what is going on right now, which is of course a targeted harassment campaign that has gone against Ethan's own kids, again including false CPS reports, again to Child Protective Services for those of you who don't understand the acronym, in order to punish him for disagreeing with Cenk's nephew. And in addition to that, people will often bring up the Jordan Peterson prophecy, where Jordan Peterson responded to Ethan removing their podcast episode because he was trying to cater to the woke by saying, Ethan, if you go down this path, essentially I'm paraphrasing, then you're going to be held to higher and higher standards trying to please these people that you're never actually going to be able to meet, and when you falter, they will throw you to the wolves. And that appears to be exactly what is happening to the 10th power, and a perfect example of this is this particular content cop. Now, we're going to talk about this, we're going to break this down, but before we do, I want to thank everybody who supports this channel via actualjusticewarrior.com/join.
Give me the money. Give me the money, okay?
I didn't plan on making a content cop on H3. It sounds very stupid even saying that. H3 content cop, iDubbbz. Ethan Klein's out of control. And then you should do a content cop on Hassan Piker. Content cop on Sargon of Akkad. If I would imagine this in 2016, I would have been like, oh yeah, if I ever do that, it's gotta be because I lose the plot.
So Ethan has already responded to this particular content cop. In fact, he did so minutes after he heard about the video being published while he was live on his podcast. And then he followed it up with another broadcast the very next day. So I want to give Ethan credit where credit is due, because he's been calling out Cenk's nephew for being an absolute coward, not responding to the content nuke against him. And again, as somebody who has a great number of disagreements with Ethan Klein, I can't call him a hypocrite in this regard, because he immediately stepped up to blind watch this video when Cenk's nephew has waited months and months and months, and by the way, participated in stuff like this particular content cop, so all these different various people can attack Ethan on his behalf. And make no mistake about this, Cenk's nephew is the source of this. He's the one who promotes all of Ethan's harassers. He's the one who platforms them. He'll watch them on stream in order to get them to get views. And in fact, he reacted to the content cop also immediately after it dropped, and the reason he did so was to try to get his audience to juice the views and the likes, although the dislike ratio has been flipped against iDubbbz, which makes sense because you're watching somebody backstab a person that they've known for 8 years with a bunch of out of context nonsense. And the overall thesis of this particular content cop is no context. Honestly, we need a context cop right here, because iDubbbz leaves so much out, it's absolutely insane. Because the premise of this is that Ethan is unhinged, he's horrible, he's terrible, terrible. He doesn't lick the balls of Cenk's nephew enough. He doesn't just worship the ground that he walks on. And really, that's due to the fact that Ethan is just an evil Zionist. He's so pro-Jewish, and he absolutely hates the Palestinians, even though nothing could be further from the truth. Again, I have to show you this clip each and every time because a lot of people have let this get completely out of hand. But Ethan's disagreement with Cenk's nephew was not that Ethan was super pro-Israel and Cenk's nephew was a defender of the oppressed Palestinian people. It was that Ethan spent 2+ hours with Cenk's nephew condemning Israel after the October 7th attacks, by the way, condemning every random Jewish person on the streets of places like Manhattan for saying bad things about Arabs or Muslims or people in Gaza. And then he played this clip of a guy called Second Thought, who is a YouTuber with nearly 2 million subscribers, basically endorsing the slaughter of any random Israeli, saying that none of them in all of Israel at all whatsoever are civilians and thus deserving of mercy.
It's a super chat.
Did the Palestinians actually take civilian hostage, or is that fake news? I don't care.
Yeah. Well, anyway, he agrees with him, so let's just
go on.
Clip.
The occupiers are not civilians. That is what it comes down to. Like if Germany, let's say Germany to be non-controversial.
That's him, right?
I think so. Yeah, I think so.
Controversial.
And not that it matters.
United States, and they said, you know what, Cincinnati, Ohio is our ancestral home, and everyone knows that's blatantly false. But they take your home, they murder your grandma, they bulldoze like your neighbor's house. Are those people civilians there? No, they're occupiers, and those are criminals. That is, there are no civilians there.
So according to Second Thought, he says that every Israeli is an occupier, and there are no citizens there.
I know, but
here's one.
No, of course there are examples of this. It's just entirely and utterly inconsequential, and I 100% stand by that.
It's not. He's an influential man. When you're expressing these kinds of...
Okay, let's walk through that. What do you think is the negative consequence of this? Do you think that people are going to see this and go, oh, I should go to a...
So should I not care about it?
I think that if you look at the reality, and I know you recognize it, a YouTuber saying this kind of thing and spending any time or any effort on this, when your moral position is clear, when mine is clear, spending any time on this whatsoever to be like, we got to clean up our own homes here, deviates from the actual message that must be unflinching. The message is that these violent means of ensuring that the occupation continues is going to inevitably lead to more violence that Israelis will be subjected to as well.
Now, Ethan wanted his co-host of a podcast for nearly 60 episodes, his friend that he talked to in private and in public, to condemn this. He wanted him to condemn this for obvious reasons. First and foremost, Ethan lived in Israel for 5 years. His wife is Israeli. He still has family members on his wife's side in Israel. And obviously, he's not going to be expected, or he shouldn't be expected, to endorse the genocide of his own people in the nation of Israel, of his wife's own people, again, a nation which he was born into. And he thinks that Cenk's nephew should obviously say that's too far. But Cenk's nephew refused to do so. This is the same conversation, by the way, where we heard the infamous baby settlers line.
Palestinians have the legal ground to violently seize back their own homes from the settlers. This is a reality, and that is precisely the reason why they have to exist under endless occupation in the West Bank.
You know what? And that's why I say, if it was settlers, that would be a lot more understandable. Yeah. But let's not obfuscate, okay? I understand what you're saying. But this dude just called babies militants.
No, I understand. And there are baby settlers as well. But there are baby settlers as well. There are babies in the settlements.
Again, this is the origin of Ethan's beef with Cenk's nephew. It wasn't Ethan hating on the Palestinians, being racist against Arabs, being anti-Muslim, or anything of the sort. In fact, Ethan is far too conciliatory to the Palestinian position, in my opinion. He's completely wrong in the other direction, but he wouldn't go that extra 5% to say that the Israelis should be killed, or it's okay for them to be killed in any circumstances because they're evil occupiers. That was the main issue, and as they ended up breaking off the friendship, Ethan started looking into Cenk's nephew's coverage, and what he discovered, and by the way, he lays out a great case for, in context, was that Cenk's nephew is broadly supportive of terrorism and terrorist organizations. That's it. That's the beef. That's what it's all about. So, of course, Cenk's nephew doesn't respond directly. He ends up having a bunch of his proxies respond. They end up attacking Ethan in all sorts of personal levels. Now, of course, this escalates to the point where people are threatening Ethan and, of course, calling in fraudulent CPS complaints against him. Now, we're going to get into that a little bit later, but let us see how iDubbbz ends up framing this situation.
He was obviously caught in this tricky situation where he is extremely sympathetic to the Israeli cause and what's happening to them. His wife's Israeli. She served in the IDF. He obviously likes the state of Israel. On the other hand, he's just got done capturing a massive progressive audience who are very politically savvy. They follow Hassan. Hassan is strictly a political streamer, so this is something they're very keyed into. So when they see Ethan say things that are just like not accurate and it's just propaganda, they're going to call it out.
From the river to the sea essentially means the state of Israel is going bye-bye.
So this massive progressive audience that Ethan has, adopted over the years, they're becoming increasingly critical of his position because now he's talking about it. Since Ethan and Hassan's falling out, I've been keeping to myself mostly. I don't have many nice things to say. Maybe if Ethan's able to get some help, maybe if he stops harassing other creators, maybe if he does these things, eventually he'll find peace and we can rekindle our friendship. So that's been my approach. I've occasionally thrown a joke Ethan's way in the form of Hassan Piker versus Ethan Klein for boxing.
I like iDubbbz. He's a good guy, but I don't like this tweet.
So throughout the course of the video, iDubbbz decides that he's going to frame this as Ethan Klein attacking these people, harassing these people without just cause, and he has a bunch of different clips of Ethan and his wife Ela Klein being very angry at a bunch of the different figures that iDubbbz gathered together for this video. And he talks about Ethan transitioning from harassment against one individual to harassment against another in multiple clips, but obviously he says it quite clearly in this clip right here.
Microaggressions.
The minute that they actually have to stick their neck out for somebody, the minute they have to actually risk something to put themselves in under scrutiny, to sacrifice something personally to stand up for racism, then all of a sudden it's like, hey, I don't want to get involved.
And that's drama.
How much do you care?
I don't do drama.
How much do you actually care? Isn't that the whole point?
Why is it inspiring?
Well, and it's the same thing, to bring it back to Hassan just because, but it kind of is the same thing. I was thinking about going to Gaza until I found out it's dangerous. He's a total performative activist that doesn't give a single fuck about the cause.
It's been performed exquisitely. Harassing one person and seamlessly transitioning into harassing another one. If anyone's been watching for the past fucking year, I'm pretty sure they have a good idea of your feelings about Hassan.
People like Anissa are the perfect example because she's friends with these people. She's friends with iDubbbz. iDubbbz is streaming this story about our kid getting Giarda from the dog, whatever.
Now, if you have your listening ears up, if you're paying attention, you might notice that Ethan Klein isn't harassing these creators. He's not jumping from harassment to creator A to Cenk's nephew, aka creator B in this particular example. He's criticizing these people. And yes, there is some anger in his voice when he's leveling this criticism, and part of the reason why Ethan is so angry in all these different various clips that iDubbbz shows is that the source of one of these clips, which by the way iDubbbz describes as Ethan having a mental breakdown or crashing out, as the kids say over and over again, is a podcast about a fraudulent CPS complaint that was filed against Ethan by these very people. This iDubbbz figure right here that Ethan was so angry that his friend iDubbbz and his wife Anissa were fans of and were friends with.
You'll notice that Ethan and Ela start talking about this iDubbbz character. Originally, the complaint was about my former editor. He's been chatting shit about Ethan and Ela for the past year at least. They only care about it now because I guess it was spoon-fed to them via their Reddit that's clearly looking out for them. Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it, we are friends with iDubbbz, but I would say it's the same level of friendship that we had with Ethan and Ela. It's kind of an internet friendship. We think that she's a good person like we think Ethan and Ela are good people. Kind of a tricky situation. How can you possibly think that they're both good people at their core? People can have crash out moments. People can say things that they don't mean. People can say things because they want internet clout and attention. I don't know, I think they're both probably guilty of saying things that they don't mean for internet clout and attention. Right now, one's a little bit more nasty to me.
She is somebody who encouraged her audience to call in the fraudulent report. And there's a clip of it. I've shown it to you. Let me play it for you.
Here, for example, is Denims, a.k.a. Hassan Waiting Room, watching Bad Empanada talk about the state of our house and how we take care of our kids. Let's take a look.
He lets his dogs shit all over his mansion, and he just leaves the shit on the floor, something that is probably related to the fact that his former housekeeper is suing him for a number of different reasons. So I would assume he doesn't actually have a housekeeper anymore, or perhaps he lost his extra housekeeper. So now the house is just like covered in dog shit. And he has kids, and his kids like crawl into the dog, and God forbid, I don't know what they do with it. I don't know if they eat it or if it's just from like contact with it with their hands or something, but they contracted a parasite that I had previously never heard of in my life called Giardia from the dog that is all over his house.
Dude, how is it that like maybe once a week I look into what Ethan Klein's been up to, and every time I manage to find more and more terrible shit. This is where Ethan tells a story about his family getting Giardia.
We already have Mold Mondays. Now we have Saturdays.
Also, this is not a joking matter, by the way. It can be very severe and deadly to small children. I mean, much like many other illnesses, it's very, very, very dangerous when infants get the same sicknesses that adults get. There are lots of things that you can get as an adult. You're totally fine. You'll be A-okay. No problem. A child, a small infant that has no immune system, shouldn't be catching anything.
Now look, you might be saying, Sean, well, in that particular clip, that Denims girl didn't directly say call Child Protective Services. I mean, she was playing up these baseless allegations. She was exaggerating what would happen if a kid had Giardia, saying that it was a deadly disease for a kid, even though it's a common parasite that doesn't get transmitted by eating dog poop. It gets transmitted by contact. And of course, Ethan's kids didn't even have this. What ended up happening was one of his kids had diarrhea from switching from breast milk to solid food, and Ethan was concerned that his kid might have had diarrhea for the same reason his dog had diarrhea, but that turned out to not be the case. But of course, 3 days prior to CPS being called, this streamer decided to just play these allegations, talk about how crazy it was and whatnot, and ultimately there was a fraudulent CPS investigation launched into Ethan Klein where these people ended up showing up to his house. Now, of course, you might say, well, even though she was irresponsible and platforming those allegations and whatnot, and they were baseless, you can't actually say that she endorsed that. You can't actually say that she supported that. But the fact of the matter is, I can say that because there was a follow-up stream from Denims where some people in her own audience were a bit concerned about this escalating to the point where there were fraudulent CPS complaints because this is traumatic for Ethan's small children, and Denims decided to respond like this.
And then the part that, in my opinion, crossed the line was like, so I'm going to visit your kids at school and ask them questions. And I says, you're not doing that.
No,
I mean, we both were like, that's not happening. You're not going.
Terrifying.
You are not doing that. So he agreed to come visit our house
back next week
when the kids are at home because he needs to interview our kids as a matter of procedure.
But I was like, I really don't want you to create any bad memory here for them. Like, they are 5 and 3. They don't understand this. So I told him.
Now, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. We are friends with Denim.
Create any bad memory for them. You're not forming memories at 3 years old, and it's very rare that you're forming memories at 5 years old.
We think that she's a good person like we think Ethan and Hila are good people.
Nah, yes, you are. No, you're not. When we're talking about being able to remember, being able to recall memories, it's like 4 is the cutoff. But even if you are forming any memories at 4, you're not going to be able to remember them past like 15. You have maybe 1 or 2 memories.
Yeah, that's right. So some people in Denim's audience are actually human people that realize that something can go too far, and she decides to tell those people not to feel those feelings, not to worry about Ethan's children, that it's not unacceptable and completely crossing the line. In reality, those kids won't remember anything, so it's perfectly fine. Again, the reason you try to make the case that Ethan's kids won't be traumatized by this, that they won't remember this, is because you don't want your supporters to feel bad for him. You don't want them to stop doing stuff like this or to think about the impact that it has on his family because you have deemed this person to be an enemy. This is somebody, if you guys are confused, who is encouraging harassment that is beyond the pale against Ethan, and iDubbbz hour-long content cop doesn't address this at all whatsoever. In fact, he takes clips, again, from a podcast that Ethan did the day that CPS showed up to his house, which had had a title that said that these people called in this fraudulent complaint against his house, and he uses Ethan's anger in those clips, saying that he's directing harassment to these people for no reason throughout the course of his video. And then he tells Ethan, oh, you need to seek help. You need to get mental health care.
Would it have been nicer and more supportive to say, we don't agree with the things he's saying and we support Ethan and Hila? Sure. Like, yeah, that would have been a nicer thing to say. Our silence means something. It means that we would like to pause this relationship until you figure your out. And then maybe we can find a moment in time, I don't know how long it'll be, but a moment in time in the future where things are a little bit easier to broach. I don't think we need to do it right now. But you've insisted that this is an important thing to address. I would have been perfectly fine with you not blasting me on your Instagram story. I would have been perfectly fine with you not blasting me and my wife on your podcast twice. I would be fine with you not brigading my comment section on my podcast that gets 3,000 views a week because I prefer to not do harassment campaigns and instead talk about Vampire's Kiss.
Like they say something like he doesn't work for me, and I strongly disagree, and I support Ethan and Hila. The problem is
that she doesn't.
That's the problem.
That's the problem.
She actually
thinks they have a point.
That's the problem.
Yeah. So go f yourself.
I agree.
Go f yourself. What about your girl? This is what I'm talking about. This aggression that you're putting out into the world. What the f do you think we're gonna do? You think I'm gonna f***ing sit on my hands when you do this? Like, this is nasty. We had such a fair response to what you guys were going through. We don't support harassment. It's a bad thing, but it happens, and you're perpetuating.
Then, to make things even worse, iDubbbz and his wife play the victim because Ethan is well aware due to leaked DMs that he is in conversations with the people that, by the way, are endorsing and encouraging people to call in these fraudulent complaints because Ethan called him and his wife out for not standing up for him. And by the way, iDubbbz decides to make this about Ethan trying to press him to endorse his political takes, but it's clear and obvious what he was trying to get his friend of 8 years to do was to say, hey, look, it's gone too far when you're calling in fraudulent CPS complaints, which again is part of the reason why I'm covering this story as somebody who doesn't like Ethan, because I acknowledge this has gone way too far. You're harassing him and his children over a disagreement on the internet, which, by the way, is a stupid-ass disagreement in the first place, but iDubbbz decides to play the victim in this. He decides to paint his wife as the victim in one of the funniest ways humanly possible.
Oh, yeah. And our other good friends.
Yeah.
Anissa and Ian. Thanks, Anissa, for standing up for your girl. I actually stood up for you so many times, because, like, why would I not? It was crazy.
Yeah, why would you not? I mean, if that's truly what you believed and you weren't just going to use it later.
Of course I was going to stand by you. That's insane. It's absolutely insane and disgusting. But now you choose to hang out with people that would have a problem with you if you defended me.
I'm not going to assume that Hila knows, but I'll say it for anyone who doesn't know. Anissa is half Lebanese and half Irish. For anyone unfamiliar, the Irish have been on the receiving end of a lot of oppression and genocide. On the part of the Lebanese, they've received a lot of oppression and attacks from the IDF. So Anissa is very well familiar with the propaganda and the shit coming out of Israel. Choosing now, out of all the times, to be like, please defend me. No, we're not going to can defend you.
Yeah, so Ian, our content cop right here, our person who's going to speak truth to power, who's going to regulate the bad behavior of Ethan Klein, says that, oh, his wife shouldn't be expected to say that Ethan and Hila are good parents, even though we've seen that, and that their house isn't covered in dog crap, and that this is too far because she's half Irish, and those people have experienced oppression, and half Lebanese. And I just want to point out, for those of you out there in the audience, that I am also half Irish, and because of my people's deep oppression and genocide, I guess I'm perfectly fine with the targeting of Ethan Klein's small children based on a petty internet beef and people trying to worship Cenk's nephew as if he's a god among content creators. No, that's ridiculous. That's absurd. Anybody who takes that position is absolutely crazy. But I also want to point out that her being Lebanese means that she could also not side with Ethan and Hila, again, on the narrow issue of whether or not it's appropriate to call in fraudulent CPS complaints. also crazy in every possible way as well. But it just goes to show you the mindset of these people, and something, by the way, that I am perfectly willing to comment on this channel, which is a lot of people who are not Muslim. And by the way, let's be clear, Anissa has put out a video of how she is no longer Muslim. Obviously, iDubbbz didn't convert to Islam or anything of the sort, but were raised Muslim, just have no sympathy at all whatsoever for Jewish people or Israeli people, even though, again, Lebanon used to be a Christian nation until Muslims launched a civil war, by the way, and a lot of them were actually Palestinians, and ended up making it a different tiered system. In fact, it's a perfect example of why a one-state solution wouldn't work in Israel, because you end up in a position where the Mennonite Christians in Lebanon are just not really in power. They have a designated sect of government, but they're obviously the most irrelevant sect of that government. And again, they used to be a majority in that particular country, and guess what? That country used to be regarded as one of the most successful Middle Eastern countries there were. In fact, Beirut was called the Paris of the Middle East before the Islamization of Lebanon. But there's no talk from Anissa, who's half Lebanese, about the things that her ancestors did, because she's on the Muslim side of that, to the Christian population, because who cares about that? We don't need to talk about that. As long as Muslims win, it's perfectly fine and acceptable. Now again, this whole video is like this. It has terrible leaps in logic. It has crucial details that are left out, and it's in every single segment. There is no charitability given to Ethan throughout the course of this, which is crazy because, again, Ian and Ethan were friends years before he knew any of these other people. Years before he even knew the woman that would ultimately end up becoming his wife, but he gives him and his wife no grace. Hila doesn't care about her, barely even mentions her name throughout the course of this particular content cop, because it's all about Ethan's mental health and how bad Ethan is, and he cares so much about him, yet he's going to rip him out of context time and time again. I mean, there's an instance where they're talking about the tier list, where a bunch of Arab creators on the stage at Twitch, and I think one of them was Jewish, by the way, ended up having a tier list that was from Arab to Love Sabra, and of course, this was seen as an anti-Semitic tier list for reasons that Ethan explained in great detail in his Content Nuke video.
There was a tier list. It was called the Who Can Say Habibi tier list. It was presented at TwitchCon as like a panel that was just meant to be lighthearted and fun. And Ethan Klein saw that, and he decided that it was anti-Semitic.
Tier list them, and we're going to need your help to discuss and figure out who can say Habibi and who can't.
And also, we have tiers. We have Arab coded. They ask permission to say Habibi. You know, like you got like a white guy's like, can I say it? Is it a slur? And then Love Sabra, which is they're not Arab coded at all.
Now, when I first saw this tier list, I immediately knew what it was doing. I was like, oh, it's a play on the who has the N-word pass and who doesn't tier list. Granted, Habibi is very different than the N-word, but it is a cultural word amongst Arabic-speaking people and Muslim people. Like, that is a word that's used. Habibi, it means my love. Oh no, don't do that, Habibi. Oh yes, Habibi. You're my Habibi, I'm your Habibi. So yes, it's meant to be a fun way that these Arab content creators can express their Arab culture and be proud of it and happy about it, because it's not like they have massive representation on the platform.
Making a tier list based on race, and nobody has a problem with that. Okay, you have a tier list based on race. Where's the Jewish panel? Where's the Jewish panel? Where at the top it says Jewish. It's a tier list based on Arab to Jew. He's Arab, which is good. That's the best thing you can be on this. That's the best. This is racist.
Now, whether you agree or disagree with Ethan's assessment, it honestly makes no matter at this point in time. But what iDubbbz ended up doing was talk about this tier list and say that Ethan was making the case that the word Habibi, because the tier list was who can say Habibi, which is a phrase that is very common in the Arab-speaking world and, of course, ironically, in Israel, was a racist term.
I would put him also in Arab. I know Turkish people are different.
Notice how they dropped the premise almost immediately that it's about who can say Habibi. And then it's like Hassan, okay, actually he's Arab. We love him. He's dope. He's Arab.
Habibi is an Arabic word. That is an Arabic word, Ethan.
Funny about this whole thing is that they say Habibi in Israel. Again, people underestimate just how like mixed Israeli culture is. Like,
we say Habibi in Israel. Yes, Ethan. Another piece of evidence as to why it isn't anti-Semitic.
This is racist!
If you're not Arab or understand Arab culture at all, which is a lot of Americans, and Ethan Klein presents you this tier list and calls it anti-Semitic, you're just going to eat it up. It's not. Ethan is just proving his location on this tier list under Love Sabra because he doesn't understand Arab culture.
That's what iDubbbz was telling his audience that Ethan's point was, when clearly and obviously that was not Ethan's point, and anybody who watched Ethan's video, to which, by the way, iDubbbz sourced clips from, would know that. Now, as if that wasn't a ridiculous enough lie from Ian right there, he actually took it a step further by omitting one thing and then lying about something else. So another thing that was clearly and obviously omitted, and Ethan has pointed this out in multiple videos that he's done on his podcast, was the fact that Ethan was specifically ranked on this list, again in the Love Sabra category, which brings me to my other point, which is, of course, that Ian was making the case that Ethan was saying that it was anti-Semitic not only to say the word Habibi, but it was also anti-Semitic to say Sabra hummus was bad.
There's a lot of people like me who eat Sabra. A lot of the times it's all that's in the store, and I'm gonna buy it and I'm gonna eat it, but it is not the good shit. Like the average Arab American, they're gonna go in the store and the only option they have is f***ing Sabra. And that sucks that that's the only option, right? Arab communities and distribution facilities are not widespread across the U.S. So what are they left with? They're left with a common, relatable hummus, which is Sabra. And what's so fucking pathetic about this whole thing is after he was able to get these Arab creators banned off of Twitch for 30 days, he goes on to talk about how bad Sabra hummus is on his show.
I don't think anybody prefers Sabra over homemade, like, restaurant quality hummus.
Guys, this is a minutes long segment in the middle of iDubbbz's Content Cop video where he's actually trying to make the case that Ethan's major issues was Arabs saying a phrase that is common in the Arab language and Arabs criticizing Sabra hummus, which is a generic hummus that is available in grocery stores. And that is clearly and obviously not the case. Again, Ethan made his case quite clear.
Top and most desirable tier is Arab. And at the bottom, the worst one is, quote, Loves Sabra. Now, why does Love Sabra equate to Jews? Sabra is a well-known Israeli company that makes hummus. They've been on the divestment list for many, many years, so the activists are well aware of their status. Oh yeah, and Sabra literally means a Jew that was born in Israel. She apparently consulted with the head of the KKK, and he told her, more subtle. So if it wasn't obvious enough, they pull me, one of the best-known Jewish creators, and immediately put me in Sabra. Hassan, by the way, who's Turkish, not Arab, is Arab. That's the good one. That's the good one. The Arab ethnicity is S tier. Then Denham's jokes that we don't have a category low enough for Zionists. Once again, calling out my Jewish identity.
Dude, where's the? You guys are missing a category for Zionist.
And if it isn't about being Jewish, why would they put Ben Shapiro in the thumbnail, one of the other most prominent Jews on YouTube, in the category next to me when he's not even featured in the game? Who's next down there? Anne Frank? Einstein? Seth Rogen? Schindler? Well, he wasn't Jewish, but they would put him down there, let's be real. It also doesn't help their case that both my wife and Ben Shapiro's wife were born in Israel, which would make them Sabras. So it also plays up an anti-Semitic trope that denies Jewish identity in the Middle East. There's this idea that Israelis are all white colonizers who are stealing the culture and identity of Arabs to make it seem like they belong there. Watch Frogan and her co-hosts accuse Israelis of culturally appropriating Arab culture.
The one thing that's like funny is that there's two types of like genocide, right? There's like genocide of real people, and then there's like cultural genocide, right? Like this is fucking funny. But like, those motherfuckers trying to take hummus and say it's Israeli is the most insane thing to me.
Dude, the fact that they have the audacity to create Sabra and make that like the staple hummus of America, insane.
It's super offensive to us. And like that's actual like cultural appropriation. Like people get mad when someone has like dreadlocks and they call that culture. I'm like, come on, it's just like a hairdo. Like it's okay. People like white people are allowed to have dreadlocks if they want dreadlocks. But like actually trying to claim our food, our desserts.
Just one question for you guys.
Who the f*** do you think is making the hummus in Israel? Martha Stewart? No, it's the same
fucking Arabic-speaking Jews that you kicked out in the 1950s. Yes, they also like hummus, and they like all the same shit you do. Because they are you. They're from your country. You kicked them all out, and now you're accusing them of stealing your culture. You want to talk about cultural genocide? Well, here it is. You racist piece of shit. Hey, scumbag, here's a hummus place we used to eat at. The chef is from Yemen. Here's another dude from Syria. Does this dude look like a white colonizer to you? Would you like to tell him he's stealing your culture? Well, this is what most Israelis look like.
Dude, the fact that they have the audacity to create Sabra.
This is casual bigotry being passed around like a leftist talking point.
None of those clips are shown right there. You can disagree with that. You can argue against that. But what you can't do is pretend that he was saying that hummus equals Judaism. Therefore, not liking Sabra hummus is anti-Semitic, because that would be an absurdly stupid point. Too stupid for even Ethan to make.
You know, it's what's there.
Like weirdly fluffy.
It is fluffy.
Weird.
Yeah.
I would buy it sometimes and eat it. It's not the best.
The problem is with Sabra, in my opinion, it's only good for the first 2 days.
For some reason, like when you eat this Sabra, it just feels so much heavier.
Yeah, it's almost like you can have a discussion about Sabra hummus being a bad hummus without it being at all related to a Jewish thing or an Israeli thing. He can have that discussion as much as he wants on his podcast, because we all know his intentions aren't anti-Semitic.
Now, you guys might be going a little bit crazy right now, wondering why we're still talking about hummus, why we're still talking about Sabra, but make no mistake about it, this is the actual argument put forward by iDubbbz in this video, that, not only is the Sabra hummus not liking it not anti-Semitic, which Ethan never said, but also Sabra hummus being available at the grocery store is actually anti-Arab. It's actually an indication of the oppression that the Muslims end up feeling in the United States of America, because it's really hard to find a lot of different Arab things in this country. It's really difficult for that to happen, and genuinely, seriously, it's just like the suffering of the Muslims because this hummus exists. So somehow, Ethan's position that he did not take, that attacking Sabra hummus is anti-Semitic, which again, I need to emphasize, Ethan never said at all whatsoever, is also now Islamophobic, because Muslims can't find a hummus from whatever Arab country that they want at the grocery store. These are the actual arguments being put forward by iDubbbz. These bad faith, ripped out of context clips. He's actually clipping Ethan from around the context where he makes his actual point in order to make these arguments. This is a real thing.
Okay, iDubbbz, I hear you. You're in the room with me right now. I hear you. I hear your request. I understand it. I can understand where it's coming from. And I guess have a policy that when there is a grade for an apology, I am just grading that discrete apology as I see it, without taking any consideration of prior or future behavior.
Oh, brother, this guy stinks!
Unfortunately, Kirk did not change his grade, but that's okay, because this is the internet. Anyone can have their own official apology rating system, so I'm going to rate Ethan's apology a B-. That's just based on my own feelings and my own rubric.
Now look, again, you can watch the full videos in context. They will be linked in the description. I'm just trying to run through this right now because honestly, I don't have the time and I could spend all day on this. But it ends up concluding with Ian trying to get Ethan's apology grade changed from the psychologist or whatever, because Ethan got a A+ and iDubbbz got a B for his apology to everyone for everything he did that was funny or whatever. And he wants it lowered to B- because he's petty about that. It's stupid. It's pointless or whatever. But then the psychologist tells Ian that he thinks Ethan needs a hug. And then iDubbbz, again, when the story is about harassment to Ethan that he's not acknowledging, says that Ethan actually needs to be physically assaulted.
When Psychology in Seattle was watching these video clips of Ethan, he said that it looks like Ethan could just use a hug. Now, of course, it kind of pisses me off to hear that because I'm like, what are we doing? What are we saying? He needs a hug? No, he doesn't need a hug. He needs a good fucking ass whooping is what he needs.
Again, absurd and insane. But then he decides to get all the people who have been attacking Ethan to say nice things about Ethan to close the video.
I think something that's very important to me in bringing back Content Cop is to be fair. I think that was something that was not illustrated in previous Content Cops that I think should have been, and probably wouldn't have left me with so much regret. Ethan deserves all of the criticism that he's getting. I think it's very valid. But I also think, at the end of the day, we should acknowledge that he's human because he is human. And he is in a situation that's making him extremely scared, paranoid, defensive, sensitive, and I'm sure other features and feelings. In the spirit of Kirk saying that it looks like Ethan could just use a hug, I have challenged some of his most powerful haters to put down the haterade and just say something nice and charitable about him, because I think he deserves it.
To pretend like this wasn't the least charitable thing that you could have possibly done.
I just wanted to say that I respect that you are genuinely yourself on the internet. I think a lot of other people respect you for it as well. I think that's a big reason why people were drawn to your content in the first place. I think that's a lot of the reason why your employees chose to work with you over anyone else.
Ethan, I think it's respectable that you even began this journey to leave behind the anti-SJW crowd and step into a more empathetic worldview. I know it's not easy.
Now, a couple of things should be pointed out for you guys right here. First and foremost, and this should be obvious, none of these people actually said anything nice about Ethan. I don't know who the Sean DeBlack guy is, so, like, I'm not paying attention to him or what role he has to play in this. But you have Denims right there who platformed the baseless allegations against Ethan related to his kids, and then afterwards decided to tell people in her audience, don't worry about it, Ethan's kids don't have any memories, to say, oh, his employees, I really like the fact that they chose to work for you. That's not a compliment for Ethan.
Ethan Klein, I think that when you are being goofy, when you're being silly, when you are being lighthearted and just having fun with your friends, I think that is when you're at your best. So I'd love to see more of that.
Then they have this guy called Matt Lieb, who we didn't really talk about in this particular video, but it's Francesca Fiorentini's husband, somebody who also, after the fact, endorsed the phony, fraudulent CPS call against Ethan in this tweet right here, saying, oh, you're at your best when you don't talk about things I don't want you to talk about. And this is how he concluded it. But of course, iDubbbz decided that he was going to cry these crocodile tears.
You know, I also see the dynamic of Ethan and Neil. I'm like, fuck, like, it's really hard to be a couple online and see people attacking your partner, and it's like, okay, like, if you come to their defense, that doesn't always help them, right? Sometimes that makes it worse for them.
About how difficult it is to have your wife attacked on the internet, and how sometimes you're afraid to speak up for her. Now, this is cut in here like it's iDubbbz saying something nice about him, but this is him talking about his situation with his wife, who was attacked mercilessly for setting up an OnlyFans account, because Ethan has never been afraid to speak up for the wife and mother of his kids, Ethan Klein, and Ethan has never been afraid to speak up for Ethan. And in fact, as we talked about earlier on this channel, Ethan has spoken up for iDubbbz time and time again, and his wife when she was in situations, and he was in situations of his own making. Now look, even though it sneaks in a little bit, the thing that happened with Ethan and his kids in CPS, iDubbbz never really addresses it throughout the whole course of this content cop, although he kind of does at one point in time, where he essentially says he doesn't give an F about the fact that this happened without actually specifically naming those allegations.
There isn't a single person that I respect who would give a if I publicly said that Ethan and Hila are great with their kids, Ethan and Hila didn't kill their dog, and Ethan and Hila wipe their asses or don't have giardia or whatever the prompt is. No one would care. The only person who would care is me, because I'm like, why did I tweet this out? I'm not tweeting out because I'm not your fucking lapdog. That's why I'm not tweeting it out. I'm not saying it to my audience because I don't give a fuck. It's not my business.
That's, in my opinion, doing something that's
Yes,
difficult
it does.
and standing by your principles. That's the whole point. That's what makes standing by your principles admirable, is that it's not always easy.
Why are you saying that I'm not standing up for my principles when you don't even know what they are? I get, like, we're a little bit past directly naming me, so we might have gone off on a tangent. If you maybe accepted the phone call and we talked about it, you could have asked me, hey, what are your principles? And I can tell you the way I've been behaving is exactly in line with my principles.
Now, he also adds that him and his wife's silence on this particular issue means something, which, by the way, was Ethan and Hila's whole point all along, that the reason that iDubbbz and his wife aren't saying that this is messed up is because they endorse it. They co-sign it. So iDubbbz ends up making a video where he says that, oh, they made all these crazy assumptions about whether we endorse this behavior or not. only for him to say that he endorses this behavior, which, by the way, is proven out by all of his actions. You don't go and meet in person with all these people that are encouraging the fraudulent call to CPS against Ethan and his children without knowing that you're doing this. And then, by the way, making a video where you edit around all those allegations when you could have even had a 1 or 2 minute clip where you condemn this. Again, it's important to understand that this is somebody who's Ethan's friend, allegedly, somebody that Ethan has defended repeatedly time and time again, and he refuses to do this. He's refused to do it in the past, and by the way, we did a whole video on how that definitely meant something on the podcast before when people brought this up to him, and he said, we condemn harassment on both sides. And it's just absurd. Again, his examples of harassment from Ethan are him disagreeing with these people on the far left and then being angry at them for encouraging a fraudulent CPS complaint against him. The harassment from their side is a fraudulent CPS complaint against him that they encouraged before and doubled down on after the fact. Do you see the difference in scale here? Apparently Ian, Mr. iDubbbz, doesn't see that because he's an absolute backstabber and betrayer. And again, I will just point out, I'm not a friend of Ethan, not a fan of Ethan. In fact, I'm somebody who's made videos critical of Ethan time and time again. But even I was like, no way, this is way too far. This is ridiculous and absurd, because I can imagine being put in Ethan's position, even though I don't have kids. And by the way, I actually have never had anything quite like this happen to me. I haven't had people call my phone, send me human remains, which by the way is something that Ethan recently showed to his audience, that he was sent human skulls, show up to my place, or anything of the sort. Target my family members never happened to me so far as a YouTuber, but Ethan has experienced all of this in spades. It's still ongoing, and Ian won't do anything. And remember, this is a guy who deleted all of his previous content cops because he unlocked empathy at age 32. No, I'm not joking about this. And he decided that it was just not cool to have them up there. But now he's saying that the only person, because he deleted all those other ones, who's deserving of one of these videos is Ethan Klein. Now look, overall, when people talk about the cult of the woke, this is a perfect example of this. Here you have a guy that is speaking about empathy throughout the course of his video, talking about how much he cares about everyone, but in reality, he is viciously jumping on a dog pile of somebody who used to be his friend for years in order to get some clout and get in with the new cult that he's joined up with. And essentially, the message throughout this course of the video is that when Ethan stops, when Ethan backs down, then he'll let him be his friend again, even though it's so delusional to think that Ethan would want to be your friend after you backstabbed him like this. And again, you remain too cowardly to say that going after Ethan's children is wrong. Again, it's insane, it's absurd, but you know what? That's all I really have for you guys today. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, show them by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on the social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about iDubbbz betraying Ethan yet again. Till next time.